You got it, Larry, if you want to start.
Oh, you're going to put that on me. Okay. Well, for starter, look, what we saw last night was a reminder of what's wrong with U.S. foreign policy. Because right now, there's no way for any viable candidate in either party to come out and say, look, this war needs to stop, and we need to sit down with Vladimir Putin and negotiate that the Russians have some legitimate concerns that we need to take into account. Nobody can say that. That's what needs to be said, but nobody can say that. So instead, they continue with this nonsensical posturing about, Trump's claiming he'll get the war done in 24 hours. Kamala insists she's going to continue to pump money into Zelensky, and that this war was going to go on and on and on. She's never dealt with Putin. And as far as Zelensky's goes, I wonder if he demonstrated his piano playing prowess to her. Remember he was the guy that played the piano with an appendage of his body. That's about all he's good for, the cocaine cowboy of Kiev. But seriously, there's no foundation for talk. So, people like Scott and I, and, Ray McGovern, and you can put some others out there, Doug McGregor, we're pariahs for the very suggestion that we ought to recognize that Russia's not our enemy, that Russia and the United States have many things in common, and that we should talk. There is no room for talk. And so how would Putin deal with Kamala? I think Putin's going to have to recognize the West is at war with Russia. And Russia is eventually, I think, going to have to come around and recognize it's got to go to war with the West.
I'll just jump in and say that I don't think Kamala Harris has ever met Putin. There's no record of it. She's never claimed to. She may have been in the White House Situation Room when Joe Biden was briefed on his, June 2021 meeting that took place, I believe, in Geneva. But she doesn't mean she went 3 days not to negotiate anything. Understand that the die was cast. She didn't. Anything that was going to happen with Ukraine didn't happen because Kamala Harris went to Kiev 3 days in advance and had a meeting with Zelensky. The Russians had already made a decision to move in militarily. That decision had been made. All the political preparatory work was being done with the Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republics declaring independence, making a request that their independence be recognized by Russia. The Duma was meeting and talking about recognition, and then once that recognition was in, making a request for to join a collective self-defense arrangement. That was approved by the president. All of this works were already done. All the preparatory work, the die was cast. Kamala Harris had zero impact. She didn't bring a single javelin. She didn't bring a single piece of equipment. It was just purely and remember her role. She's a vice president that has been given no role. She has no power, no say. She's not, say what you want about Joe Biden, but, he had some gravitas attached to him in the Obama administration. He was given the Ukraine portfolio. Kamala Harris has given nothing. She went over there to deliver a message. She was a messenger girl, and that's it. How will Putin treat a president, any president? Let me put it this way. I'll answer it by just listening to the Russians, which Ray McGovern has always reminded me is a very smart thing to do when talking about Russia. You might want to listen to the Russians and see what they have to say. The Russians, I've spoken with Ambassador Anatoly Antonov a couple of times. That might be one of the reasons why the FBI has visited my home. What did you say to the ambassador? None of your damn business. It's called journalism and free speech. But I'll tell you what he said. When we talked about American politics, which was very little, out of respect for the fact that the Russians don't want to be seen as meddling in American politics, he said that the most important thing from his perspective, and he believed it carried over to the foreign ministry, was predictability, that's what they were looking for. And he said, look, let's be honest, Donald Trump is not a predictable man. He's very unpredictable. Yes, there's a chance that the Trump presidency could deliver better relations. But the fact is, Trump promised that in 2016 and delivered more sanctions, brags about it openly. Unpredictable, very difficult for a nation like Russia to formulate a policy to deal with the United States when you have this level of unpredictability. Now, there's no love lost between Vladimir Putin and Joe Biden, but the implication was that Biden was predictable. And even though a Biden presidency might not contain policies that are favorable to Russia, Russia can deal with the Biden presidency and formulate counter strategies based on the predictability of the Biden administration. Kamala Harris is an unknown. She's an unknown. She has indicated that she's not going to inherit the Biden foreign policy team, that she'll bring in her own team, which means that we're going to have a period of adjustment as her team, if she wins election, adjusts to the fact that they're now called upon to lead, not just sit back and observe. What policies will she come up with? Will she simply inherit the Biden policies and move forward, or will she deal with a new geopolitical reality she has to adjust to? It's unknown. So I would say that there's a strong factor of unpredictability administration, but it's one that, because it is establishment based, the Russians can assess eventually will settle into establishment policy objectives and directions. Therefore, in the long term, a Harris presidency is predictable. A Trump presidency is unpredictable no matter what. And even especially now, he is dumped. He's not going to bring back his former team. He acknowledges he made a mistake in bringing in many of the people that he brought in, McMaster, Pompeo. Even though he spoke highly of Pompeo last night, Pompeo stabbed him in the back when it came to North Korea. He's bringing in outsiders. Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr. will be advising the transition team if there is a transition team. This is all new, and new means unpredictable. Plus, there's just Donald Trump himself, who's an unpredictable character. So I think the Russians, when Vladimir Putin said, I'm leaning towards Kamala Harris, he was trolling, 100% trolling, just out there having fun. But I'll tell you why I believe that, because in November, I was preparing for a trip to Russia in December of last year. I put in a request to interview Vladimir Putin and Dmitry Medvedev, and it was received favorably, but then it was turned down. And the reason it was turned down is they said, number one and number two, Putin and Medvedev will not be giving interviews to American journalists out of fears of being seen as getting involved in American politics. Now, something changed. Tucker Carlson went and did his interview. But I think what changed is that the Russians have been gradually recognizing that you can't treat America responsibly because America is an irresponsible nation, that there's no coherence coming out of Washington, D.C. when it comes to policy, and that maybe the best thing to have done in February was to agree to the interview with Tucker Carlson, which they did. And since that time, you've seen the Russians increasingly making commentary, active commentary, not because they're trying to interfere in the election, because they don't care about the United States anymore. We just don't factor. I mean, they have to care about us, but they're not worried about insulting our sensibilities. So Putin is actively trolling Kamala Harris and at the same time trolling Trump. One of those two people are going to be the next president of the United States, and Putin's trolling them right now in an election cycle. How will Putin treat them? Once they become the president of the United States, Putin will treat them with the utmost respect because they are the leader of a great nation. Even if America's in decline, we're a great nation. We have significant power. We have to be considered. If there was a meeting between Kamala Harris and Vladimir Putin would be polite, would be correct, would be diplomatic, and so would all of his officials. If there was a meeting between him and Trump, he would do the same thing. I don't see, Putin behaving irresponsibly. I don't see Putin behaving any different than he is today. Look at every single meeting he has with a foreign official, and look how much respect he gives them. Look how serious he is in the accomplishment of his tasks. So I don't see there going to be any difference. I think from the Russian perspective, both Harris and Trump are unpredictable, and Russia's going to have to deal with this unpredictability. It's going to be very difficult for them. But if called upon to meet with either one of these, Russia will treat them with respect, give them a chance to be heard. Vladimir Putin's very good at listening. He'll give them a chance to make their case. He will absorb their case. He will consult, and he will respond professionally, diplomatically. He's not a child. He's not a kid. He's not a teenager. He's having a little bit of fun right now because what else do you do when you look at this train wreck called American democracy? You have fun. But when it comes time to actually do the business of the state, he will do the business of the state professionally, with dignity, with honor, and with integrity.
Thank you so much. I want to end what you just said, Scott, brilliantly. What Maria Zakharova said in her latest interview with Sputnik, she said regarding the debate, crazy to hear two people actually discussing how and for what they are going to punish the world. So now let's stay with President Putin and something that is taking place as we speak, and that is Ocean 2024. In his address to his cabinet, I think it was today, if not yesterday, he said, I would like to note that this is the first time in last 3 decades that we have conducted such a large-scale military exercises at sea. They will be held simultaneously, sorry for my English, in the waters of the Pacific and Arctic Oceans, the Mediterranean, Caspian, and Baltic Seas. This is a very, very big exercise. What is your opinion about it, both of you gentlemen? He mentioned the goals, but I would like you to tell the audience how serious those exercises are. And one more thing I want to say before I give you voice. I think he announced that there are 15 countries that have been invited to observe those exercises.
Yeah, well, it's important to understand that an exercise, particularly of this size and magnitude, this isn't something they decided to do in the last 6 months or even last year. This was planned at least 2 years ago. And, you know, the purpose of military exercises are one, to have the forces demonstrate that they understand how to communicate with the chain of command in a crisis, that they understand the kind of information that they need to generate in the midst of, if they're called out and deployed, what the requirements, logistics requirements are to make those movements. So all of this is designed to demonstrate what the naval force could do in the event of a coordinated or combined operation. And that's why they're moving both in the Pacific and the Arctic and the Caspian and the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. And most of that's going to be communications. Just, can they communicate simultaneously, get accurate communications, and then those ships respond appropriately? Can they issue orders? Can those orders be effectively carried out? But this is all being planned 2 years out. So the fact that it's happening now is not necessarily, it wasn't designed, in my view, to send a particular signal to the West in response to, say, the invasion into Kursk. This was planned way in advance. But it is to demonstrate that Russia is taking very seriously its naval capability, because traditionally it has not been a naval power.
Yeah, I agree with Larry that this isn't a knee-jerk reaction carried out by Russia. It's a well-planned out action, but it's one that's been done in concert with, for instance, China, with Iran, with other nations. This is a global response, and what Russia has said, I do believe they are sending a signal, which is, if there is a conflict with the United States and NATO in Europe, that the conflict may not be limited to Europe, that it will be a global conflict, and Russia has the capacity to reach out and touch them using naval power globally. It's also a signal to China. Russia has been, increasing the joint patrols with China, unprecedented action of Russian and Chinese bombers approaching the Alaskan air defense identification zones. And I think Russia is also reinforcing commitments it made to China, that China will not be acting alone if the United States provokes a conflict in Taiwan or the South China Sea that becomes a Chinese American conflict, that Russia will be there, and this is a demonstration of capability and capacity. I hope the West is listening. I hope the West is watching, because we tend to operate under the notion that we can localize conflict, that we can limit the scope and scale of any escalation. For instance, we can keep it confined in Ukraine, but if it does spread out into Europe, we can act decisively to limit the spread of this conflict. I think Russia is sending the signal that no, it views the United States as a global power, and any response that will be done to any American aggression anywhere in the periphery of the Russian area of interest, including the Arctic, will be a global response. And this puts pressure on the United States now, because if you have op plan, whatever the Arctic number is, 007113, I'm just making that up, to American response to the Arctic, and America saying we're going to surge capacity to the Arctic, which means we strip capacity elsewhere. Now the planners are going, wait a minute, if we surge capacity to the Arctic and we lose capacity here, but Russia's deciding on a global response, we need to, so it makes our planning more difficult. And I think that's the purpose of the Russians, is to make life more inconvenient and difficult for the United States, Europe, and their Pacific allies, who have been moving aggressively to try and put pressure on Russia and China. And I think Russia is responding by doing something that puts pressure on them.
Thank you so much. Actually, President Putin said in that address to his cabinet that in the context of growing geopolitical tensions in the world, those exercises are very important. And I even titled this live stream ahead of this live stream, which I usually don't, as Russia must be ready to repel military aggression from any direction. This was even the article on TASS. So can I just say on that note, when he said this is the largest of this form of exercise in the last 3 decades, you know what I've done? I said, all right, 3 decades. So it was 1988. I wonder what was happening in the world in 1988. And you know what was that? In May of 1988, President of United States, Ronald Reagan, visited Soviet Union. The Moscow summit took place. And, Scott, this is your topic here. The Medium and Short Range Reduction Treaty was signed. Look where we are, 3 decades later. This is like time travel, isn't it? It's crazy. So here, I want to ask you about Turkey and BRICS. Turkey will be joining BRICS, as I understand. It's going to shake up everything. And does it mean that Turkey is going to leave NATO as soon as possible? And when that happens, how this will affect NATO and all those countries who are part of NATO?
Well, I frankly don't understand why Turkey has put up with the crap from the EU for more than 30 years. They've been trying to get into the EU, and they've been constantly rebuffed. Basically told they're not good enough because they're Muslims, that they're, they never used the word Untermensch, but that was, lingering there in the background. So they've taken insult after insult, all the while being the second largest army in NATO, which means they really sort of an indispensable force in NATO. And it looks like the events over the last 2-3 years have finally hit home, at least with the Turkish leadership. I'm pretty sure the Turkish people already understood it, but the people like Erdogan were a little slow on the pickup, that their future doesn't necessarily lie in the West. They've been bamboozled, they've been taken advantage of, and now they're all of a sudden finding with BRICS that, hey, they get treated with respect, they get treated like they're adults, and instead of rejection, they're finding acceptance. So yeah, I think this will be one other nail in the coffin of NATO. The first will be the defeat of Ukraine, and then Turkey will, I think, come to see that NATO is really no longer a viable operation, and it will move out. And I don't think they're going to do a dramatic break, but the the era of being able to count on Turkey as a valued member of NATO, I think that's coming to an end.
Yeah, I agree. Look, let's just reflect on things. It's 2024 right now. 100 years ago, plus or minus a couple years, the Turkish Caliphate, the Ottoman Empire, dissolved. 100 years ago. That's not that long. The Turkish Republic came into being. Why do I bring up the Ottoman Empire? The Ottoman Empire was a caliphate. It was an Islamic state. The Islamic religion dominated throughout. And even though Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the first president of the Turkish Republic, sought to create a secular state, he was very much swimming against the upstream, working against the grain. Turkey has been, is, and will always be an Islamic state. I've lived in Turkey. I've traveled in Turkey. You wake up in the morning to the sound of the muezzin, singing out the call for prayer. I mean, it's a heavily Muslim. When I was there in the 70s, there was a political leader, I think his name was Erbakan, who was vying for power. The Turks, the military had to step in and ban his Islamic party from political activity. How do you ban Islam in an Islamic state? It doesn't work, and it didn't work. And eventually Erbakan's party redefined itself, came back in, because you can't deny it. Erdogan is a successor of Erbakan. He actually, entered politics under Erbakan. He is an Islamist. He is an Islamist leader of an Islamist nation that's struggling against the forces of secularism. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk is widely revered inside Turkey for being the father of the Turks. But the Western orientation that he took Turkey down is no longer seen by the majority of the Turks as the desired path, because they've been rejected. The West hasn't received them. As Larry said, the European Union, it only gives lip service to Turkish membership, and only because Turkey's a member of NATO. If it weren't for the NATO connection, the EU would never have taken a Turkish application. It's just like that Turkey solidifies the southern flank of NATO, the second largest army. All the numbers that NATO keeps throwing out there, we have 300,000 men in a rapid deployment force, rapidly deployable. The majority of those come from the Turkish army. And I think it's the Second Corps out of Istanbul and Izmir. That's, a NATO corps, organized to NATO standards, ready to act, ready to jump, ready to rock. And that may have played up until 2016. But what happened in 2016? Remember, it was the coup. And who carried out the coup? NATO-trained officers, NATO-trained leaders. And Erdogan went, we're done with that, flush the system. The general officers today aren't NATO-trained. They're Turkish-trained. These are guys handpicked by Erdogan to reflect the values of Erdogan. Many of them are Islamist in nature. Now, this doesn't mean it's going to a path of a theocracy, but this is the reality of Turkey, is an Islamic state. It's inherently incompatible with the European Union vision. And frankly speaking, it's inherently incompatible with American hegemony. Again, I bring up the Ottoman Empire. Erdogan has pan-Ottoman aspirations. He sees Turkey becoming a great nation again. He sees Turkey. Look at some of the maps that the AKP, his party, put out. The Vilayet of Mosul in Iraq. It used to be part of not just the Ottoman Empire, but considered an extension of Anatolia proper. The British tore it away, but the Turks aren't happy with that and have been fighting that ever since. The Vilayet of Aleppo in Syria. Again, part of Turkey, part of Anatolia proper. This is part when the Turks say the Turkish heartland, Mosul and Aleppo are part of the Turkish heartland. They've been ripped away. Hasn't sat well with Erdogan. That's why he's involved in Iraq. That's why he's involved in Syria. He's also gravitated to the east, Azerbaijan. Again, I just bring up history. The Turks at the end of World War I actually invaded and occupied Azerbaijan. And brought it in. It was only because the Ottoman Empire collapsed that they had to leave it. But Azerbaijan is considered to be part of Greater Turkey. All the Turkic-speaking people in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, they're part of a grand Turkish. There's the Uyghurs in China. Erdogan has ambition for them all. Ask the Chinese, who's the number one operatives operating in China right now against China's interests. It's Turkish intelligence, and they're operating amongst the Uyghur population because that's just what Turkey does. So, Turkey is incompatible with the Western vision, incompatible with American hegemony, incompatible with what the European Union thinks it wants to be. It's a member of NATO now because it has benefits. It's been addicted to these benefits, but slowly it's weaning itself off the NATO addiction. And this jump by Turkey to BRICS is a dramatic jump. If in fact Erdogan does go to Kazan, if Turkey is invited to join, it doesn't mean that Turkey leaves NATO instantly. Erdogan's too much of a survivor, a political savvy person to do that. You don't jump ship too soon. What he'll do is get himself situated in the East, get part of BRICS, get comfortable. Right now, the foreign minister of Turkey is in, I think he's in Moscow right now for a summit of BRICS states to talk about security arrangements. This is Vladimir Putin's vision of a Eurasian NATO. Turkey, a NATO member, is now in Moscow meeting with the Russians to talk about a future Eurasian security arrangement. Turkey's straddling both sides, and eventually, having made that decision, they're not jumping back to Europe. They've made that decision because eventually they're jumping both feet in with Eurasia. That's the direction they're heading. It's the end of NATO. This is the death of NATO. NATO will dissolve, I believe, in less than 10 years. It's done. The European Union may not survive that long. Turkey has basically said, we don't want to be part of either one of these sinking ships. We're getting off the sinking Titanic, and we're getting on that new big giant Carnival cruise liner, because that's a hell of a party getting ready to ride.
Yeah. And let me just point out that Turkey has upgraded its airport in Istanbul. So it's now a major, major hub. And the airport is just spectacular. It's unbelievable.
I would have liked to seen it in June, but they took my passport.
Yeah.
I hope I am online now because my internet was off for a moment. Yes, can I just say here, through my travels to Russia, Istanbul airport is my number one. So here, let's follow the money. Let's talk about money for a change, right? For a change. A little bit of facts here. It may take a moment, but some people like the numbers. So there is a website I come across that is, when I was trying to research how much money has already been spent on supporting Ukraine project. And this website is called Ukraine Oversight. That's the website. I might attach it down below the live stream. The US Congress has appropriated more than, those are numbers I think from June or July, so this might be even lower than it is now, $174.2 billion in supplemental funding to Ukraine. On this website, there is a chart that shows from this $174 billion, $110 billion went to Department of Defense, from Department of Defense, I believe. State and US aid was $57.8 billion. Other US state agencies was $5.7 billion. Now, there is another chart which talks about direct budget support to Ukraine provided through the World Bank since February 2022. And on that chart, we have one group, which is EU, Germany, UK, Denmark, Norway, Japan, France, Poland. So mix, not all of those countries, as we know, are in EU. That is $19 billion of support. And then on the other side of it, it's like a cake. United States, $23 billion. In total is $42 billion. Why I'm talking about this is this. Not long time ago, a few days ago, I recorded a video in which I've mentioned, I forgot the name of the person already, it doesn't matter, people from Verkhovna Rada, okay, the Ukrainian officials who are lamenting that Ukraine has no money to pay its soldiers. Simple question, where is the money?
Who knows? I had a discussion with Matt Ho a little bit ago, and he was describing what he saw in Iraq back in 2003 with just the amount of corruption. And he described this one meeting. He had replaced another American, and he had like $10 million sitting on the table, and it was stacked up, and he was giving it to one of the local Baghdad authorities. And so he put it there, and so the guys on the other side of the table were like, gesturing at him and saying, "Hey, you ought to take your cut." He goes, "Take my cut?" He goes, No, this money's for you." They go, No. Your predecessor knew. He always took his cut. And what they wanted him to do was take, a couple of the stacks of dollar bills out of there. That's exactly what's going on in Ukraine. Exactly. It is, in fact, what Matt enlightened me on, because he said a lot of the same characters that had been in Bosnia and Serbia, that with NATO in that operation, who grifted and made money off of it, then shifted their operation to Baghdad. And now I guarantee you, same thing's going on up in Kiev. The wrong people are getting wealthy.
If you don't have an effective audit capability, it falls apart immediately. Money is one of the greatest corrupting influences in the world. It takes a rare person to stare at $10 million on a desk and know that if $1 million of that disappeared, nobody would care and leave that $1 million on the table. That's a rare person. Matt Ho is a rare person. He's a genuine American treasure. I've seen it in the United Nations. It's everywhere. You have to have a very effective audit trail, one that has enforceability, one that puts the fear of God into everybody, so that whoever touches this money accounts for it, make sure it's distributed as required, and then follows up and make sure it's spent as required. You have to put the fear of God into everybody on the chain. If at some point, because of expediency, you decide that you're going to limit the audit trail to a handover between agencies or between legal entities like governments or states. So I can be an American officer with my satchel full of money. I sit down with my Ukrainian counterpart and I go, "Here's the money." And then that's it. That money will never get spent the way it's supposed to be spent, because now there's no accountability. That Ukrainian is going to take the money, and there might be rare Ukrainians, but you're never going to get them in succession, meaning that you're never going to get a situation where a good Ukrainian takes the money and gives it to the other good Ukrainian, who takes the money, who gives it to the other good Ukrainian, who spends the money its way it's supposed to be spent, so that the soldiers at the end of the line get paid, get equipment, get etc. No. Ukraine is a feudal system. That run by oligarchs and run by criminal gangs. Every aspect of Ukraine operates this way. Battalion commanders are the equivalent of criminal gangs. They get a pot of money. They are in control of that money. They get to do what they want. First thing they do is they buy themselves a nice house. Then they buy themselves a nice vacation dacha. Then they put some money in the bank to get their wife clothed, to get their mistress clothed, make sure the mistress has a place next to their vacation. They take care of everything. They get the liquor cabinet stocked up, and then they take this money and they put it out there. They give it to the company commanders. They give them their share. And the company commander's got to take care of himself too. He may not be able to buy as big of a dacha, but he's going to take care of himself, take care of his mistress, take care of his wife. And then they come down, and at the end, there's a little bit of money because they got to do something. So they buy the soldiers this, that, and the other thing, but the soldiers always get short change at the end. Now, we know this going in, so we put a lot of money in, because we know that we can't, it's not going to be the way we want. So we put a whole bunch of money in, and now we're playing games, you see, because now in order to put all that money on the table, we have to lie to Congress. Now, Congress is used to being lied to. They get lied to on a regular basis. All Congress does is vote and pass it. There goes the money. But now Congress is being lied to by people who are enriching themselves from that grift. And the enrichment can be direct or indirect. Remember, not everything means you have dollars on the table. It's about favors being done, about influence being bought, and peddled, etc. This entire Ukraine conflict is one big giant scam, grift, corruption machine. I'm not saying that the American military officers have bank accounts. That'd be stupid to do, because eventually you'll get caught. Hopefully there's some counterintelligence people out there, running, looking at the money and all that stuff, making sure they're not doing. But there's other things that happen. You get wealthy through stock tips. You get wealthy through investment opportunities. A real estate opportunity comes up where you get to buy into it that suddenly triples in value. You make that money. There's ways that this happens, or you just succumb to the normal vices of men in faraway places, women, whiskey, drugs. All of this is taking place. This is destroying America in more ways than people can possibly imagine, because Afghanistan led the way. Understand that we just pulled out of Afghanistan in the same system that resulted in this. Remember, helicopters full of money as they're flying away, bags are falling out, money's flying all over the place. That's Afghanistan. The same people that gave us that then were immediately put on Ukraine. It's not like we recruited a new team of Boy Scouts. We brought in the most corrupt people on the planet who just lost their grift. Are going, how are we going to make? Oh, wait a minute! Here comes Ukraine. We're going to make money off of Ukraine. This is disgusting. Disgusting. Look, Russia's. I'm not saying Russia's as bad, but we see the arrest of Russian people, Russian officers. There's corruption in Russia as well. But they're being arrested. They're being prosecuted. When was the last time you saw an American 3-star general in the docket? You're sitting there handcuffed, having charges read to him. When did that happen? It doesn't happen. When did the colonel get arrested and put in? No. In Russia, it's happening because they are anti-corruption. They're trying to do the right thing. Here in the United States, and Ukraine is just horrible, literally horrible. You can't do business in Ukraine honestly. And so I would just. I don't want to pick on people. I will. She's a graduate. She's a graduate of Franklin and Marshall College. My school. Farkas, I think, is her name. Former
Evelyn Farkas. Yeah.
Go through Evelyn's photos. She may have purged them by right now, but there's some photos of her wearing a Burisma jacket as she's visiting Burisma plants. I'm just telling you, if you got touched by Burisma, you got money from Burisma. You're corrupt. Now, Evelyn, if you don't want to say you're not corrupt, let's talk about it. But I'm telling you that anybody who does business in Ukraine is corrupt. Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, they went to this Crimea thing run by a guy named Pincus, I think his last name was, Pinchuk. He donated millions of dollars. When she was Secretary of State, she wasn't supposed to meet with him. She would go to New York to go to a meeting, and then they would secretly take her off to meet with Pinchuk in a hotel room where deals were made. Corruption. That's the name of the game. Joe Biden, his father, corruption. 10% to the big guy. I mean, it's right there in our face, and we're doing nothing about it because it's so prevalent. Nobody wants to be the one to call it out because you won't make it. Everybody's getting rich off of this, and they'll go after the guy that calls them out. I mean, I've gone on too long, but the point I'm trying to make is Ukraine is the cesspool of humanity in terms of corruption.
Anya, did you say the amount was 174 billion or 107 billion?
174.
Okay, so we're talking almost, that's 20% of the U.S. annual defense budget. I mean, that is equivalent to that. Think about that. I mean, it's
on the website. It's on the website. I will attach down below so people can check it out.
Yeah, just an incredible amount of money.
But Larry, it's more than just that 20%. This infects everything we do here in America. Look at the Sentinel, intercontinental ballistic missile program. We used to know how to build missiles. They're always expensive. There's the military industrial complex is always about making money. But we've become, look at the F-35. It is just a giant grift. It's meant to make money, and it's not meant to produce aircraft. It's meant to make money. It's overpriced, over budgeted, drawn out. The Sentinel program had to be canceled because Congress passed laws that said we'll do an initial audit, and if you're over, I think it was 12% over your budget, we shut you down. They've had to shut it down twice now. Yeah. We can't build a missile because we don't know how to build a missile without corruption, without the grift, with everything. And this is how we operate in America. Yeah. Everything with our defense, $800 billion, $900 billion, $1 trillion a year. My God, Larry, we could cut the defense budget by 40% and have a more efficient military than we have now if we just cut out the corruption.
Yeah, no, I agree. In fact, I looked up the price change in stock, the stock prices of Raytheon, General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin. They have all doubled or tripled since the start of the special military operation.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just so that's what this war is about, making money. And then as Scott mentioned with respect to the space program, just before we got on your show, the Cosmodrome lifted off carrying 3 people, 2 cosmonauts and 1 NASA astronaut. Why? Because the United States no longer has the ability, at least from NASA, to fly anybody to the space station. Hell, we can't even get 2 astronauts who are stuck up their back. We got to wait for Elon Musk or the Russians to do it. And I never cease to be amazed that we got all this antagonism. We're talking about wanting to attack Russia. And yet here Russia is still hauling our sorry ass to the space station.
Because Russia abides by its contractual obligations.
Yeah.
I know, Anya, we're going in directions you don't want to go, and I apologize, but what the hell? Do you remember back before the war how the Congress, everybody, Germany can't trust the Russians. You're addicted to Russian energy, but now they own you. The Russians now can cut off the energy anytime they want to take control of Europe, blah, 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 blah. And I kept saying, you don't get to be an energy superpower by sucking at delivering the energy that's been contracted. What makes Russia a great power from an energy perspective is its reliability. And that's important in energy security. No one's going to sign a damn contract with Russia for the provision of gas and oil if they think in a moment Russia can just cut it off because Russia's pissed off about some issue geopolitically. When Russia signs an energy contract, Russia delivers on the energy contract as contracted. And look at them now. Even as the West is sanctioning and this, that, and the other thing, what's Russia doing? Delivering on their contract, up to and including the fact that the oil and gas that transits Ukraine requires Russia to pay Ukraine billions of dollars a year in transit fees, and Russia pays these fees because it's contractually obligated to do so. Russia is the most reliable damn nation in the world when it comes to its contracts, to its commitments. And people should just reflect on that right now. Why is Russia sending NASA operators into space? Because they promised they would. They signed a contract, and Russia will always deliver on its contract. You shake a Russian's hand, that is like a contract. They're honorable people. In the West, I can't say that. I can't say that anymore. I used to believe it. I used to believe that I could look a guy in the eye or a gal and shake their hand, and that their word and their grip was their bond. Not today, man. Even if they sign a piece of paper, they're going to have some sort of small little print down here hidden somewhere, and some annex hidden in some attachment to something that say, oh, well, you didn't read Annex Z Alpha 1300.4, paragraph 3C12, which says everything above doesn't matter because this nullifies it. We suck as a people because we have become anything but honorable in the way we treat others. The way we treat the Russians today is despicable. I'm disgusted by my fellow Americans. You can say what you want about Putin, but generally when you speak about Putin, most people speak about it on the basis of ignorance. They don't know Putin, so they're afraid of him. So they say, okay, forgive that. But the way we treat the Russian people is horrible. The Russian people are like we are individually. They're humans. They're just like we are. Collectively, they have their act together. They believe in things that are going to sustain their society a lot longer than our collapsing society. But that's a judgment call. You don't have to agree with them. But my God, the way we treat them as if they're ignorant, as if they're uncultured, as if they're no appreciation for their history. I'm ashamed of my fellow countrymen when it comes to this. I'm not saying you have to fall in love with Russia, although if you give it a chance, I think you would. But I am saying that maybe you should do what John F. Kennedy urged all of us to do back in June of 1963 as an American University address, is to view them as human beings and realize they breathe the same air we do. They eat the same food. They want the same things. They live on the same earth. Treat them with respect. And amazingly, if we did that, we wouldn't have Donald Trump and Kamala Harris debating the nonsensical things they talk about, because they would have, before they opened their mouth, they would have taken pause and said, I'm getting ready to speak about Russia or China or any other nation, and therefore I have to treat them with the respect that they deserve. Just like I would hope when people talk about America, they treat the American people with the respect we deserve.
Thank you so much. And can I just say here, as all of us at this round table have been to Russia many times, my advice to everyone who is watching is this. If you go to Russia, you have to experience it yourself. Because when you do, then you will open your eyes and some veil from your eyes will be lifted, and you will understand that whatever you were told is just simply not true. But you have to go there and you have to experience those people. And if you never experience this, you are easy to be brainwashed. So, since we are talking about the gangs, this is a very serious question because, okay, the report says that at least 21 million illegal immigrants have crossed the American border. I recently came across many videos that were showing the gangs from Venezuela in the state of Colorado, I believe it was in Denver, who were pretty much kicking out the residents from their apartments. I want to ask you, since I'm not in US and I know you're aware of it, I want to ask you, how is this even possible that someone who lives in this apartment is kicked out by the gang? And where is the police? Where is the protection for the citizens? And this is one question. And on the same note, what do you think is the number one issue for, regardless, okay, who will be the next US president? For the next United States president, number one issue in the United States, what is that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be border security, and the media and Democrats are doing everything possible to try to tamp down stories. The other story that have emerged over the last couple of days is in a city in Ohio, 60,000 people, they've just dumped 20,000 Haitians, and the Haitians have been caught. They're eating ducks, they're catching geese, and they've even allegedly killed and eaten cats and dogs. So, this kind of thing is out of control. And it was highlighted when you had Merrick Garland and Christopher Wray, head of the Attorney General and the head of the FBI, sitting at that press conference last week talking about Russia meddling in the presidential election in 2024, when they're the very people charged with upholding the laws that prevent illegal migrants from coming into this country, and they're not doing a damn thing to stop it. They're, in fact, enabling it. And those migrants are going to be voting in the election and may very well swing it. So if legitimate voters vote, the issue is border security. But if the corruption takes hold, the very insecurity of the border will be the dominant, will dominate at the election.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in James Carville's old adage, it's the economy, stupid. Right now, immigration is the big issue because it can be used to explain away a lot of what ails America, from crime to the economy, etc. It also, I think, insults the sensibilities of most law-abiding Americans. And even there's some like me. My wife is an immigrant. She came from Georgia. She came legally, and we had to do everything right. But I understand. Her parents, they lost their homes in the Civil War. And this country, the United States of America, opened its arms to them. They came over here. And this country took care of them. So I believe America is capable, and indeed it's desirable for America to absorb, people from abroad. That's where we all came from. I mean, look at our names. If you're color, if you're skinny, color of your skin's this, man. Or if it's dark, and if it's brown, it doesn't matter. If it's red, you were born here. But if it's, of course, they're not red skin. I'm not being racist here. I'm just being, generalizing. But I'm just saying that, yellow people, Asians. There's a lot of Asian Americans. You're not from here. You're from Asia. European Americans. We're from Europe. Black Americans from Africa. Brown Americans from, Mexico and South America. Many of them are indigenous from that area. My point is, this is the melting pot. Now, people, you can't use the term melting pot. That's a Zionist term designed to do. I don't care. I use it. I use Irish stew, whatever you want to say. We throw everybody together. We blend it up. We have a constitution that creates a framework around which people are supposed to adapt, and it works when you do that. Regardless of where you came from, at the end of the day, if you raise your hand, you say, I promise to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, and you would adhere to that, you apply that, we're okay collectively because we all stand for the same thing. It's when you deviate from that, when you bring in people who aren't part of that, who don't identify with that, who come into the system not respecting the laws. You remember we were talking about corruption? How do you fight corruption? By having the fear of God for the people that are handing the money, that if you steal the money, you're going to pay a heavy price. You're going to get caught. When people come into the United States, if they don't understand that we are a nation of laws, that these laws are derived from a singular document called the Constitution, that you must adhere to the principles and values of the Constitution and respect other people. If you don't do that, if you think, no, well, I'm from a specific ethnic group, therefore the rules don't apply to me, then we got a problem. The country starts to fall apart. And when you allow people to cross the border illegally in large numbers without consequence, the appreciation for the rule of law collapses. And that's where we are today, with significant populations coming into this country that don't identify with what it means to be an American. They identify with getting free money, they identify with getting free housing, but they don't identify with what it means to be an American, a citizen of the United States of America, a constitutional republic, which requires your allegiance to and adherence to the principles and values set forth in that document. And this is where we have a significant problem in America today. So immigration is going to be the big issue unless we have economic collapse. If we have economic collapse, then whatever triggers that, I think, is going to become the big issue. And again, that's problematic for the Democrats because they'll be held accountable. The other one that could happen is, hey, you know how to wake up people about the dangers of nuclear war? Have a nuclear weapon go off.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you right now, that may happen between now and November. So all you people out there going this, that, and the other thing, abortion, this, that, and the other thing, there's a good chance a nuke's going to go off between now and November. And that may be the end of the world. And watch people wake up when that happens. Watch what happens when people take a look at the video of downtown London. Twisted wreck. All the things that used to make London great don't exist anymore. All the people that live there don't exist anymore. Wait till they see that in Warsaw. Wait till they see that in Rome. Wait till they see Paris. Wait till they see that in Baltimore. Wait till they see that in Los Angeles. Guys, it's going to happen. Kamala Harris made it damn certain it's going to happen if she's elected. If she's elected, there's a 100% guarantee there's going to be a nuclear war with Russia because she doesn't know how to deal with Vladimir Putin. She doesn't know how to deal with Russia. Trump at least acknowledges there's the danger of nuclear conflict. He's the only person out there right now that's saying it. Jill Stein's saying it, but I wish her luck. RFK Jr. was saying it, but he's no longer a candidate. Trump's the only one saying it. But even then, if you push him, what's his answer to Putin? Well, I'm going to make a call, and he's going to do the way I want to, or else. Or else what, Donald? Or else what? You're going to nuke him? You just acknowledge that we're going to have a nuclear war. Kamala Harris is the most dangerous person on the planet right now because she doesn't understand the situation that she's trying to inherit. At least the Biden administration recognized the danger of nuclear war, but they have signed a new nuclear employment plan that forward deploys low-yield nuclear weapons aggressively in a preemptive mode. That means we're going to go to war because we're going to think we can limit it. We're going to drop a W-76-2 low-yield weapon on Russian troops someplace saying, aha, we showed you, we nuked you. Now you're going to stop. And the Russians will go, oh no, Sarmat. And that's the end of America. This is the direction we're heading. So even though immigration is a huge issue, and it has been for some time and will continue to dominate, I'm telling you that there's two things that can take over between now and Election Day.
Yep.
absolute economic collapse, which can happen at any moment, and a nuclear war. And if we survive the nuclear war, I can guarantee you that the people running for office are going to have to tell the American people how they're going to deal with the consequences of this new nuclear era. It's a conversation we should be having now, but we're not.
Can I say one more thing before we end this? There is an African proverb that I remember very well, one of my favorite ones, who says, if there is no enemy within, no enemy without can do any harm. And I think this is the problem. This is the enemy within the United States that is playing not just with the life of US citizens, but with the lives of citizens of other countries at this point. So I know we are already in 1 hour and I don't want to take more of your time. I'm immensely, immensely grateful for you joining me today for this round table. You can find Scott Ritter on scottritter.com. The link is already down below this video, and every other link is on his website. And Larry Johnson is Sonar21, fantastic website, great blogs as well. And I would like to encourage all of you who haven't bought my book that I collaborated on with Scott Ritter. Yes, buy the book, because you never know how long it will be out there. Covering Ukraine, the Scott Ritter interviews through the eyes of Anya Kay. I am waiting for my own copy. Please don't be discouraged how long it takes. As long as you get it, that's what matters. And I want to thank Larry for writing the afterwards for this book. So
piece of
thank
cake.
you so much.
To the people out there, it's not a criticism of Clarity Press, but I think the book has attracted far more demand than Clarity Press anticipated. They didn't print enough books. And then when those books sold out, it takes time to get back into the queue. So if you're ordering from Amazon.com, you're going to notice a delay. If you order from Clarity Press, it's print on demand, meaning that you order the book, it goes straight to the dedicated printer who prints out the copy, it gets out, and it gets out. So if you want the book now, try Clarity Press. You might get it quicker. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait for Clarity Press to catch up with Amazon.